Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about conclusion paragraphs, and so this is kind of wrapping up your entire essay. And so we are going to talk about the structure and kind of some things to do and then some things to avoid when you're writing conclusions, and we'll be practicing this in class soon. So I've given you the definition of symmetry on this first slide because that's kind of our theme for what we're talking about with conclusions. They are symmetrical to something else in the essay, and I hope that you'll kind of see that and that'll help you remember what a conclusion should be written like when we finish this today. So let's kind of talk about overall essay structure first. I think that's going to help to set us up for what a conclusion is. So we have our introduction that has attention getter, transitions, and the thesis statement. We've talked about our typically three body paragraphs, which are structured with topic sentence, evidence, commentary, concluding sentence. And then finally, we're going to have the conclusion. And the conclusion, if you can kind of see from the way I've formatted this slide, is actually going to be a direct reflection of the introduction. So the introduction goes attention getter, transitions, thesis. The conclusion will go thesis, transitions, attention getter. And we'll kind of explain why that is as we go. So at this time you can answer question number 1 on your flipped handout. And you can also go ahead and answer question number 2 because similar to the introduction, to have a really strong conclusion that actually provides significance, you really are shooting for probably 5 sentences minimum, I would say. All right. So like I said, conclusions are going to be a reflection of the introduction. And so we're going to talk kind of about what that means. So the conclusion is symmetrical to the introduction because it starts with this thesis statement. Now, that doesn't mean that you just get to copy and paste your thesis statement from your introduction. Rather, this should be a revisitation, and you should be refreshing the thesis. So what I kind of mean by that is that you should be, now that you've gone through this whole essay, you should really be explaining to your reader what you have actually proved. Like the thesis statement in your original introduction you were trying to prove, now in the conclusion, hopefully you've actually shown that. Usually kind of similar to the thesis in the introduction, it's about 1 sentence long, but you're really providing that significance. The second part of the conclusion paragraph is going to be the transition sentences. So similar again to the introduction, you are transitioning from the thesis to the attention getter. Obviously in the conclusion it's backwards, but same kind of idea with these transitions. However, the transitions are really important in a conclusion because they need to have what I like to call a significance step. And what that means is that, you've gone through this whole paper, you've hopefully proved some kind of point. Why does that matter? Why does it matter in the real world? Why does it matter for that particular piece of literature or whatever we've been doing? Like, you need to kind of be explaining to your reader what the significance of your entire essay is now. Similar to the introduction, to really get this full analysis, I would recommend having 3 sentences to effectively transition. And then the last part of your conclusion, you're going to bring your attention getter full circle. What I mean by that, again, you're not just copying and pasting a quote that you used originally. You are looking at what you've done in the body paragraphs, and hopefully now that you've written this whole essay, your attention getter, whether it was a quote or a story or whatever you started out with, hopefully it's even more meaningful now that you've gone through this whole essay. Do try to keep this condensed, 1 to 2 sentences to wrap this up. So at this time we can actually answer questions 3, 4, and 5 on your flipped handout. So I'll give you a second to go ahead and do that. Next, I'm going to talk about some things to avoid in the conclusion paragraph, and I see these mistakes a lot, so make sure that you're avoiding these things when writing. First of all, don't ever just straight up copy and paste anything from your introduction. I think sometimes when we talk about the conclusion being a reflection of the introduction, students have a tendency to just be like, okay, well, I'll just copy and paste my introduction and just flip it all around. No, 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 like I don't want to read the same thing twice, and that wouldn't make any sense anyway, so don't do that. Instead, again, you shouldn't be repeating what you've already said. You need to be providing an overall view, now that you've written this whole paper, of why your ideas are significant. Now that you've gone through and written this whole essay, why is your thesis significant? Why is your attention getter even more meaningful now? So that's question number 6, are some things to avoid. So I'll give you a second to go ahead and answer that. Finally, guys, I want to provide you with an example introduction and then conclusion paragraph. And I'm actually not even sure my screen is going to fit this last sentence in, so let me fix that real quick. Okay, so the top half of the screen is a sample introduction paragraph, and then the bottom half is a sample conclusion paragraph. And I've kind of color-coded the different parts. Attention getter is in pink, transitions are in yellow, and thesis is in, transitions are in orange and thesis is in yellow. So I'd really like for you at this time to pause your video, read through the introduction and conclusion, and kind of look for those things that I've been talking about. The writer has provided a sample introduction, and then in the conclusion, instead of just copying and pasting, he has really explained the significance of this topic in both the thesis, the transition sentences, and then notice the attention getter. The quote is not just copied and pasted. Instead, again, the significance is explained. So really take a look at that example. I think that'll give you a good idea of what a sample introduction and conclusion should look like. So again, guys, we're going to be practicing these conclusion paragraphs in class, so please make sure that you have your worksheet filled out and you're understanding what we're going for on these paragraphs.